Good evening, everyone. I'm Roger Mosey, the Master of Selwyn. You're very welcome here tonight. And tonight we're going to have a film, showing of a documentary, and then a discussion about it. And we're delighted to welcome Shehab Khan, who's a Selwyn alumnus, SE 2017, who did a Masters here, and Delilah Jeary, who is one of the ITV people she's Deputy Head of Longform, which is a very television-type title. It means she essentially commissioned and argued for this film to be made. So she's very welcome as well. And we also have with us Martin Napier, who's the director of the film, sitting on the front row, along with a colleague from ITV Public Affairs. So you're all very, very welcome indeed. And we also welcome our online audience. And I know from the John Silverman session last week, we had some hundreds of people watching that. And the Selwyn YouTube channel, this won't be very impressive to TV, where you're dealing much bigger numbers, but the Selwyn YouTube channel has just passed 1 million views. So we're very proud of the number of people who join us online as well, and you're also very welcome. So what I'm going to do is just throw a couple of questions to Shehab and to Delilah, and then we're all going to watch the film, which lasts about 30 minutes. And then afterwards there'll be questions and answers from the audience from our panel. So Shehab, impossible to sum this up in a minute. We're going to ask you to. Why did you want to make this film?
So my day job involves me being a political correspondent for ITV News, which is obviously vastly different to this subject matter. And this was an opportunity to show quite a personal side of my life in a way that I hadn't done before. My religion and faith is something that is quite important to me and quite important to a lot of British Muslims around the UK. And this was a unique experience. It's something that Muslims do usually once in their lifetime. And this was a chance to share it in a way that hadn't been done before, which was the sort of primary objective behind it, and just to share it with people that wouldn't usually have the opportunity to be there, because it is something that only Muslims are allowed to do. There are millions and millions of people in the world who will never get to experience what it's like, what it looks like, and that was basically the purpose behind it, was to try and share that experience with as many people as we could.
And you now sometimes present ITV News as well as being a political correspondent, and you did some live reports into ITV bulletins as well as making the film. So it was quite a departure for ITV to be able to show that kind of access to the Hajj?
Yeah, and it was, and I'm sure we'll get into it after the documentary, it was logistically quite challenging. There was a lot of work that went into getting that access, negotiating with the Saudi authorities to allow us in, to have a camera in there, and then also simultaneously not only do this documentary, but as you say, we were on the news bulletins on the 6:30 and the 10 doing different bits and pieces. So this wasn't the only output, and we did some stuff for digital, and we created some bespoke content for some other platforms as well. So there was a lot going on in a very short period of time, all with the intention of just sharing this experience with as many of the ITV viewers as we possibly could.
So Delilah, when you hear about this project, is it something you thought immediately of being a major ITV documentary, or?
Well, you're always thinking, what's the picture, when you're presented with an idea, and immediately you knew that this was going to have an amazing picture. There's so many people going. It was such a evocative event, and so many different aspects of it. The question was always how can you fit it into half an hour? And then the other question you always ask is there are no new stories, just new angles, new access, and this access was really special. So we very quickly realised that we had sort of the perfect combination. And so we went to ITV, the sort of bigwigs there, and they agreed that it was, and then it was, that definitely something we should be making, and then we're going to do it with the news, and then it was just a question of how quickly can we get it ready to go out on air after the Hajj has finished.
Okay, well, what we're going to do is move to the front row so we can watch the film. Shehab, we called this session Faith, Television and Me, about your experience. I found, as someone without a faith, it's actually very emotional and moving. And I just wondered, when you were making this film, your pieces to camera are quite dispassionate almost. I just wonder how much emotion you felt at the centre of this extraordinary event.
Yeah, I think when you're working, a lot of your mind is split between the fact that you are simultaneously going through this quite emotional journey, whilst at the same time you are also thinking about where the camera should be pointing, whether we've got the right thing, what is this going to look like when I get back, have I missed a really important moment? And you're trying to balance both simultaneously. And it meant that there are, because I thought the same thing when we got back to the edit suite and we were going through it. There was a lot of times where I was overwhelmed with emotion, but they were the times where I wasn't really thinking about the project that we were working on. So it's trying to balance both of those things, whereas if you are there as someone who is going through this journey, you're not balancing two things at once, which is why often the people pictured are arguably visibly a bit more emotional than I was through.
Mark here is the director and writer of the film, as we saw at the end of it. He was in London, and you just tell us what was happening. So, for instance, there's that moment when you're doing the stoning, when there are all these people around you, and you're doing a piece to camera.
Yeah.
How did that work?
Yeah, so that, like you said, I think there's roughly a couple of 100,000 people there at any given moment, and that's all going on behind me, and we've set the camera up, and that took more than one take. Which I'm afraid and sad to admit, but basically you're trying to capture this incredible moment where people are going through this big experience. It's towards the end of the Hajj. Loads of people are incredibly emotional. They're quite tired, and generally it's not normal for a camera to be set up on a tripod in the middle of that scene. So trying to get the shot and make it work is a challenge. Interestingly, Mark and Delilah were obviously back in London and not there, and it was liaising with them throughout at the start of every day, being like, this is what we're doing today, this is what it's going to look like, and having a chat in the morning about what we think would also be the key bits to get on camera and how it needs to look. And that piece to camera and those things don't happen without the conversations that we all have together.
Yeah, but part of the selling point of the programme was it was Shehab doing the Hajj, because I think that was what was new, what got attention of the channel. There have been documentaries that have kind of looked at the Hajj from a sort of bird's eye view almost and sort of documented it, but this was this immersive experience of being on it with him. So that was really, I think you did a brilliant job at sort of walking the line on that, showing that there's emotion, but you can't be overwrought, and sort of lose yourself in it. You've got to be continually a reporter and reporting on it and explaining. There's a lot of explaining to do. So I think that was all the different sort of things you were having to juggle as you were surrounded by people in boiling hot weather.
I'm going to bring in questions from the audience. If you're watching online and want to email and ask a question, just do it to master@sel.cam.ac.uk. master@sel.cam.ac.uk. I will bring the audience in a moment. Delilah, to what extent, when you were commissioning this, did you think there is an image of Islam in the world which is often negative, and this is something which shows the reality of the religion in a different light?
Well, that was a huge part of the privilege of making this, I think, was to show this incredible experience and people in this community of people from all over the world. As you saw, there were so many different places, countries represented, but I think we took that to heart, didn't we, Mark? I mean, we felt that responsibility because you were serving two audiences. You're serving a British Muslim audience that know about the Hajj, who are going to be looking out for any mistakes you make, or they want the detail, they want to have the moments honoured. But you also are serving an audience that doesn't know anything about it. So you're getting to show them this incredible emotional and kind of communal experience. So I think those were things that we were really conscious of all the time. But it was definitely a privilege to do that, I think.
And Shehab, how much did you want this to be a personal journey, but how much did you want it to change attitudes and opinions?
It's a bit of both, and I think that was a lot of the discussions we were having. It's not often that you talk about your faith in such a public way, especially as an impartial journalist who tries to keep opinion and personal stuff out of his work as much as possible. This was a chance to show, like you say, a different side to our religion, mainly because obviously over the last 2 decades or so the focus has been on other much more horrible acts that have taken place, and this was an opportunity to show a side and an experience that every Muslim goes through, which is deeply emotional, it's deeply spiritual, and it's very different to, I think, anything else that most people will have experienced, and a lot of our audience wouldn't have even had a clue what it looks like, what it feels like, what that immersive experience is like, because it's never been filmed in this way before. And this was an opportunity to show people something which I think is quite an extraordinary thing, regardless of whether you believe in religion or not. The fact that 2 to 3 million people gather in this one place every single year, in what is an incredibly peaceful gathering, which is a logistical nightmare for the Saudi authorities to have to get all those people in, get them there for 5 days and get them all home safely. It's quite an extraordinary thing just on a human level, and it was an opportunity just to show that.
Okay, I'd love questions from the audience. Tisat here has the throw microphone, so if anybody wants to, question there.
Wow, this thing's cool. What I wanted to ask about, and it was kind of touched upon with the animal sacrifice and also giving then food to the people in need. Did you notice a dialogue among people about the change of like having smartphones accessible on like quote unquote spiritual journey and things, like, obviously quote unquote, but in terms of, I always associate like technology as being almost the antithesis of spiritualism, and in this way it seemed like people really seemed to be documenting it themselves, and that was kind of a new experience. Were there people both pro and anti, or how was the dialogue around technology?
Yeah, it's an interesting debate to have. There's obviously everyone has a smartphone, everyone has a camera. This is a once in a lifetime thing. It costs a significant amount to be there. It's not very cheap. For a lot of people who are there, this is their life savings. This is the thing that they've spent a very long time working towards and saving their money towards. And there are a lot of people filming it as they go along, taking photos as they go along, because they want to document and remember that moment. This time, there'd been a bit of a break because of the pandemic, and it meant that the Saudis had spent a lot of time integrating technology into the experience, more so than we actually went into here. So there was, when you get there, you get given a card which is quite similar to an Oyster card, and you can scan it, and it tells you where you're supposed to be and when on your phone. It has all your details, your passport details, it has your blood type, it has every single medical thing you can think of. So if you were to faint or if something were to happen, a paramedic, and you're supposed to wear it around your neck, so a paramedic will take that off you, scan it on their thing, and it has every single thing on there. It then also links you through to the service in which you pay for the animal sacrifice. There are robots, probably not the right word, but those wireless Hoover thingies going around cleaning and doing stuff. That contactless card you can use to pay, so you can top it up, so then you don't have to carry a wallet with you. So if you get hungry along the way and you want to buy a sandwich or something, there are shops that take payment through that card. So there's a lot of new technology in there. And then there are some who say, and it's the same for when you go to, this is a bad example, when you go to a concert, for example, there'll be a lot of people who have their phone out, despite the fact they've paid for a ticket, and they'll be recording it. And there'll be other people who will say, I've spent money to be here and I want to experience this and not look at it through my phone. And it's a very similar human debate when you're there, of some people saying, I've paid a lot of money to be here, this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing, I don't want to spend my time looking at my phone, I don't want to use the apps, and some people don't, and it's a completely personal choice.
Can I ask just tiny...
I think we'll move around for questions. If we have time, we'll come back to you. But questions in the rest of the audience? Yes, sir. There, sir.
Great. Catch.
Good catch. Well done.
Nigel Grimshaw, thank you very much. That's absolutely superb and moving. Realistically, how much damage do you think the 2016 disaster inflicted? I mean, it seems to me almost like a Grenfell Tower moment, if you see what I mean. A lot of people died.
Yeah, so again, this is something we spoke about quite heavily when we were creating the piece and the film, to reflect what had happened, not only in 2016, but there was another incident a few years before that. And when we spoke to the Saudi authorities about it, they were quite open about the fact that a lot of work had been done since then to try and make sure it was much safer than it had been. And they sort of briefed us about the work that they'd been doing, and we looked into it independently about the sort of crowd management techniques that have gone on since then. And when you're there, you can really see it as well, because there'll be there are cameras everywhere, and they have almost like a I don't know what it would be called, but like a centre which is set up with loads of different screens where they've hired in external experts to watch different areas to see when it looks like there may be too many people in one area. And they have people there managing the flow, so they will close off gates to certain areas, and they will divert people in different directions. And it's infuriating when you're there, because you'll be sort of here, and then you're trying to go 100 metres straight, and all of a sudden there are police guards in the way that are telling you that you need to walk all the way around, and it's going to take you half an hour, and you can see the gate that you're trying to get to. And that is basically what's taking place, and it's because of those huge disasters that happen that they go above and beyond to make sure that doesn't basically happen again. I think it was a huge moment, not just in the Middle East, but sort of for Muslims around the world, because we were all watching it on the news and we could all see it could have happened to any one of us who was there at the time. And it is reassuring that nothing like that has happened since, and that there has been a big shift and a lot of money has gone in to make sure it doesn't.
I'll take about four people. So if you'd like to go first, and then we'll come there, and then we'll go on that. So yeah.
Thank you so much for showing and creating this. I was curious if there was any part of the Hajj, any moment or ritual that you were sort of considering not showing, or if there were any moments that you see them on the screen and you sort of wonder if not broadcasting them would have, retained some, I don't even know if spiritual or power is the right word, but some, the heaviness of being in the moment that you couldn't necessarily get through the filming.
Probably saving the embarrassment of shaving my head. That would probably be the one thing
Fair.
that, if I could avoid having on there, I would. But in terms of the actual part, it was really important that we showed as much of it as we possibly could, because this was about educating people more than anything else. It was about sharing this experience in a way that hadn't been done before. We don't know when we'll next be allowed back in to film something like that again, so it was really important for us to basically be able to show anyone who doesn't have the opportunity to go there what exactly it looks like and what it feels like. There are some moments where I went off and did my own thing a little bit and we didn't film. So we would film me doing it, and then I would take 5 or 10 minutes to then go do it and then not have the cameras on. And the team I was with were also participating in the same way as well. So there are periods where we are sort of putting the camera down to make sure we do the process properly. But this was really about sharing this experience and just sort of opening up a side of our religion in a way that we haven't done before.
Yeah, and I think also this film can't be a list of stuff, it has to be a film that has emotion and pace. You'll see quite a lot of the time you just let the picture breathe, because you can't just be like, and then we did this, and then we did that. So, and you only have a certain amount of time to explain it all. So every line was poured over, and we really did kind of try and make it, every line do lots of work for us and give information, but give atmosphere as well.
Thank you.
Gentleman in front there, yeah. And then we'll go on this side.
Assalamu alaikum, Shehab, and I just want to say thank you so much for this amazing documentary. I remember when this aired in July last year, and it was about a month ago before my mum and my dad went on Umrah in August, so it was quite a good preparation in some ways. But I just wanted to ask you, in terms of like the critical response that the documentary has had as a whole, how has it been received? Because certainly in our local community in Cambridge, I'm based in the university, I work in the social media team, but I know in our local community, being born and raised in Cambridge, it was very well received in our Muslim community. But just wanted to ask, what was it like amongst the general public, and do you have sort of future plans to create more documentaries around Islam going forward?
The reception to it is like nothing I've experienced before. I think I've said this to you quite a few times. If I go to Friday prayers, or if I'm in an area which is predominantly Muslim, people still come up to me now and say that it was something that they felt really touched by, and everyone has an emotional connection in some way. Either they've been, or their parents have been, or they're about to go, and therefore there's something that sort of draws you to this in a way that nothing else that I've ever done before has. I've been working at ITV for quite some time. I feel like I've covered some pretty big news stories. I've done some pretty big interviews with prime ministers and world leaders, and my family included have not shown any interest in any of that ever. Whereas this felt like it was something different. It was, because it was such an emotional and personal thing, it feels like people have felt more emotionally attached to it and been very supportive of it, which has been great. In terms of the next question about whether we're going to do more, I think that one goes to my esteemed colleague on my right.
Yeah, we're always looking for new. I mean, it did have a really big reaction, and I think the channel really took notice. So watch this space, as they say.
Okay, we'll get the microphone over to Janet, the Vice Master. Delilah, the traditional TV question, what were the numbers like? How many people?
I think we got on the night around about 1 million, was it? And no one ever knows what happens on the ITV X player, so we don't know what. But I mean, it's in terms of response on social media and stuff. Just that people really engaged with it. I think that people were very passionate about it, and obviously you got a lot of people coming to you. So I think it really got out there, people were excited before it went out, and they were delighted when it went out.
Okay. Professor Janet O'Sullivan, our Vice Master.
Thank you, Master. Thank you so much. I was absolutely fascinated, and as Roger said, that was extremely moving, rather to my surprise. I want to ask you something of a secular question, if I may. The prospect of 2 to 3 million people coming to one place blows my mind, having stayed in a tent at the Hay-on-Wye Literary Festival. I mean, you showed beds and tents, but presumably there was a huge logistical organisation with food outlets and bathrooms and that sort of thing. I mean, how is it organised?
Yeah, I was surprised by how sophisticated it was, because I'd never been before to do the Hajj, so I had the exact same reservations that you did. I wasn't too sure what the bathroom facilities were going to be like. I wasn't too sure how anything was going to work. It sounded like it was going to be a challenge, but you get there, and as we tried to show in the film, they have essentially built an entire city filled with tents. They're arranged in quite a clever way. It's almost done geographically, so it's country by country. So you are allocated a tent before you get there, and then when you arrive, the tent for everyone who's from the United Kingdom is in one place, and it tends to be next to the tent for everyone who's from France, and it's bizarrely it's sort of grouped by countries which are allies. So the Russian tent was elsewhere, and it wasn't too close to the British tent. It's really interesting. So and they sort of divided everything up so that you would be able to move and talk to people in quite a seamless way. Every street has its own sort of hospital or like medical tent. There's a big hospital, and then every street has its own medical tent, and then there's restaurants, there's shops, there's sort of makeshift, but they're permanent structures, so they are always there in place for that. And then there are huge sort of bathroom facilities, both in the tents and outside of the tents. And then they're also split by gender, so men are in one section and women are in another section to make sure that everyone gets their own privacy in the right way. I found that I didn't feel inconvenienced once when I was there, because there was such an abundance of shops and restaurants and facilities that it was fine. The only problem is when you all collectively move from one place to the next, and I don't think there's much you can do about it, because it is 3 million people all moving 5 miles all at the same time, which does take quite some time to do, and in the heat it is a bit of a challenge. But in terms of the facilities, this is obviously something they've been doing for centuries, so they've got good practice at building what they need.
Thank you.
The gentleman next to Mike Nicholson with the hat. So.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. I just wanted to find out what you observed in terms of gender equity. I mean, traditionally in the mosque, the females sit at the back. What was the separation during the Hajj? Was there any specific arrangements where it was female only and male only? And how much of the political system interferes with the spiritual aspect of it? Now I can call you an al-Haji, right?
That's the technical term, yeah. So the first question about the gender split inside the mosque, I don't think there is much of a split in terms of who goes at the front and who goes at the back. There are areas which are designated for men and for women, but from what I know, when you're right near the Kaaba, which is the central bit, it's completely mixed, and people are walking as they're performing rituals together. It's the same as you're doing the actual rituals themselves. People are completely mixed, and you'll see couples holding hands, husband and wives holding hands, and parents and their kids, and everyone is sort of mixed together as they go through the ritual process. But then when you return to the tents, they are segregated, so men and women will sleep separately, away from each other. But then there are hotels which are also set up for when you're not in tents, which is done as you would at any organisation. You book as a family and you can stay as a family together. What was your other question, sorry?
Politics.
The politics. I don't know is the honest answer with you. I'm not an expert on Middle Eastern politics. From my personal experience, when I was there was no interference from the politicians, but there wouldn't be, because I was sort of there as a civilian going through a spiritual journey, and it's not something they would intervene in. I honestly couldn't tell you whether or not they have any influence over how it works. I suspect that when it comes to the logistical challenges and the money, it comes from the state, and they'll have some say over how those things should work. But the practices have been in place for hundreds of years, and they've not changed. But
I'll have to pass that last question, I'm afraid. I think we've got time for just 2 more questions in the hall, and I've got one online I want to go to. So we'll keep the microphone up there for a moment, and then we'll go right along here. So Tissa, will be a big challenge in a moment, but yeah.
So I want to ask about the difficulties of production, because you said, it's like the first time this has ever been done on British TV. So, like, how long did it take to sort of get the Saudi Arabian government to agree with it? What were there any sort of issues they had with it? Why isn't it that you say that everyone's got a camera on their phone? So is it just like they just don't want people with big tripods and big cameras walking around? What's the difficulties?
So the initial idea happened about 2 years ago, and we started talking to the Saudi authorities about getting access from that moment onwards. It takes a while to negotiate these things anyway. It's made more complicated because this is a once-in-a-year thing. So when we first started talking to them, we didn't have enough time to get everything done. So then it delayed the process by a solid 12 months anyway, because it's not the type of thing they can give you a permit for and you can go film in next week. You have to wait exactly 12 months to do it the next time around. So that delayed the process. The reason why it's a challenge for them is, as you say, tripods and camera kit and professional camera stuff is quite big, it's quite heavy, there's 2.5 million people there, it can be a bit of a nightmare, it can cause issues and disruption when they're trying to move so many people around, and they're not used to having roving broadcast cameras around. So they had to carefully think about how that would work and not impact safety. So there was a lot of discussions about how many people we could bring in and how that was going to work, which is obviously something that Delilah had to deal with.
Well, we were trying to get more people, and we couldn't persuade them in the end. But I mean, actually, it turns out we didn't need more people because he did a great job, and you were like many people. But I mean, they didn't make any stipulations about what we would include in it, and we wouldn't have been able to agree to that anyway. So I think they understood. The Saudi embassy in the UK definitely seemed to understand that once you give this access, you just have to give it and let people make what they will. So that was our regulator would insist on that. So that was good.
Yeah, and it was from their side. It was them having the reassurances that we were going to cover this in a respectful and appropriate manner, and that we weren't going to go over there and do something that would be inappropriate and offend millions of Muslims around the world. So there was a lot of discussion about what our actual intention was and what we were going to do.
Okay, a final question in the auditorium, then we've got a couple more.
Mine's a very pragmatic question. I was actually at Medina last year. I was only at the gates of the mosque because I'm not a Muslim. I went in the evening, I went in the morning, I saw the pilgrims. I was very moved by their expression, by their dedication, by whatever. But what I don't understand, I mean, there were a lot of people there who must have worked all their lives. How can the Saudis justify £15,000? And I presume that's economy class rather than, I should imagine there are a lot of more expenses once they get there. £15,000 times 2.5 million people is going to cover all their costs. I cannot come to terms with that amount of money for pilgrims to go to Mecca.
Yeah, it's probably a question for the Saudi state as opposed to me. Again, I'm guessing here. I suspect the cost for renovation and all of those things probably adds up to quite a bit, and in terms of sort of ferrying people back and forth, £15,000 is a lot of money. I don't know if that's how much it costs if you're coming from different countries. I don't know if it's a different amount if you're from the UK versus if you're from a country elsewhere. That figure may be slightly different. The figure we used was the average for a British pilgrim to go on the Hajj. It is very expensive. People do spend their entire lives saving for it because it's a sizable amount, but the price of it is probably one that the Saudi state would be best placed to answer.
You showed pictures of the very rudimentary accommodation that they had, most of them. Are there hotels around there? I mean, can people opt to stay in a 5-star hotel that overlooks the Kaaba? And do they?
Yeah, so there are many luxury hotels around the area, and you would stay in those hotels just before the Hajj starts and just after it ends. But during that period in which you're going through the process, it is those tents that you stay in. And it's supposed to be part of the experience, is sort of stripping away that complete luxury feel and everyone being equal and everyone going through the same process together. But in the run-up to it, there are some quite nice hotels if you fancy a trip there. And You'll be well looked after, I suspect.
A couple of final quick questions
Thank
for Delilah. This shows, I suppose, that public service television, linear television, free-to-air television can still have a big impact and can change attitudes.
Well, I hope so. I mean, we did put a lot of, the team worked incredibly hard to make this. It's a real labour of love. And I don't know how far it's changed attitudes across the country, but it's served our audience, and that's really important. We're hopefully informed and educated in the best Breathian way possible.
And Shehab, a question from online from Professor Colin Humphreys, one of our fellows, who says, thank you for a wonderful film. And a good last question, really. What will you most remember about the experience?
I think the collective emotion that you see around you is the big takeaway for me. It's on a, like I think I've said this a few times, on a human level, it is quite extraordinary. As someone who's born and raised in London, being essentially in the middle of the desert, sleeping out under the stars with 2 million people, everyone going through the same thing, people sharing food, people I'd never spoken to in my life, coming over and just giving you the food that they'd made or having a chat with you. And there was loads of conversations we had where you don't speak the same language and you sort of gesture towards stuff and you stay up all night and you're just conversing with people on a very, very human level. Even if you take the religion and the faith out of it, it's quite a beautiful thing when that many people are all really peaceful, all there together, all going through the same journey. And you're moved by it, regardless of what your own personal views are. When you're sitting opposite someone who's a farmer in Jordan and you're sharing food with 10 different people and they're all from different walks of life and you're all having a chat and half of you don't speak the same language, those are memories you sort of keep forever.
Shehab, thank you so much for a brilliant film, which I know people here in the auditorium and I hope online enjoyed as well. We also thank Delilah Jeary, who helped commission it and get it into shape, Mark Napier, the director, Jess Harrett-Kerr from ITV as well. And thanks to everyone for coming tonight. And I hope you show your appreciation to Shehab and the team. Thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye.